Hello, this is my part 2 of my Chinese Civil War series. During Japan's invasion or occupation of Manchuria, Chiang Kai-shek refused to ally with the CCP, preferring to unite China by eliminating the warlord and the CCP forces first. He believed his forces were too weak to face the Japanese Imperial Army. Only after unification could the KMT mobilize against Japan. He ignored Chinese people's discontent and anger at the KMT policy of compromise with the Japanese. Instead, ordering KMT generals Zhang Xulang and Yang Husheng to suppress the CCP. However, the provincial forces suffered significant casualties in battles with the Red Army. On the 12th of December 1936, the discontented Zhang and Yang conspired to kidnap Chiang Kai-shek and force him to a truce with the CCP. The incident became known as the Xian incident. Both parties suspended fighting to form a second united front and focused their energies and fight the Japanese. In 1947, Japan launched its full-scale invasion of China. The situation came to a head in late 1940 and 1941. The clash between the communist and KMT forces intensified. Chiang demanded in December 1940 that the CCP's the Fourth Army evacuate Jiangsu provinces during this time only, as when the CCP and KMT's broke down. Under the terms of the Japanese unconditional surrender declared by the US, Japanese troops were ordered to surrender to the KMT troops and not to the CCP, which was present in some of the occupied areas. In Manchuria, however, the KMT had no forces. The Japanese surrendered to the Soviet Union. Chiang Kai-shek ordered the Japanese troops to remain at their post to receive the Kuomintang and to not surrender their arms to the communists. By the end of the Second Sino-Japanese War, the power of the Communist Party grew considerably. The main force grew to 1.2 million troops, backed by an additional militia of 2 million, totaling 3.2 million troops. The liberated zone in 1945 contained 19 based areas. In March 1946, despite the repeated requests from Chiang, the Soviet Red Army under the command of Marshal Rodion Malinovsky continued to delay putting out Manchuria, while Malinovsky secretly told the CCP forces to move in behind them, which led to a full-scale war for the control of the northeast. These favourable conditions also facilitated many changes inside the communist leadership. The more radical hardline faction, who wanted a complete military takeover of China, finally gained the upper hand and defeated the careful opponents. Although General Marshall stated that there was no evidence of the CCP supplied by the Soviet Union, the CCP able to utilize a larger number of weapons abandoned by the Japanese, including some tanks. While the large number of well-trained KMT troops began to defect to the communist forces, the CCP was able to achieve material superiority. The CCP's ultimate trump card was its land reform policy. This drew massive numbers of landless and starving peasants in the countryside to the communist cause. This strategy enabled the CCP to access an unlimited supply of manpower for both combat and logistical purposes. After the war with the Japanese ended, Chiang Kai-shek quickly moved KMT troops to the newly liberated areas to prevent communist forces from receiving the Japanese surrender. The US airlifted many KMT troops to central China and the northeast, Manchuria. President Harry S. Truman was very clear about what he described as using the Japanese to hold off the communists. In his memoirs, he writes, "It was perfectly clear to us that if we told the Japanese to lay down their arms immediately and march to the seaboard, the entire country would be taken over by the communists. We therefore had to take the unusual step of the enemy as a garrison until we could have driven Chinese national troops to South China and then send Marines to guard the seaports." Using the pretext of receiving the Japanese surrender, business interests with the KMT government occupy most of the banks, factories and commercial properties, which has been previously seized by the Japanese army. The US strongly supported the Kuomintang forces. About 50,000 US soldiers were sent to guard strategic sites in Hubei and Shandong in Operation Beluga. As a post-war negotiations between the nationalist government in Nanjing and the Communist Party failed. The civil war between these two parties resumed. The stage of war was referred to in mainland China and the communist geography as the War of Liberation. Knowing this deficiencies in manpower and equipment, the CCP executed the passive defense strategy. It avoided the strong points of the KMT army and was prepared to abandon territory in order to preserve its forces. In March 1947, the KMT achieved symbolic victory by seizing the CCP capital Henan. The communists counterattacked soon afterward. On the 30th of June 1947, the CCP troops crossed the Yellow River and moved into the Dabi mountain areas. By late 1948, the CCP eventually captured the northern cities of Chang'an and Chengchun, to control the northeast after suffering numerous setbacks while trying to take the cities. With the decisive Liaoshen campaign, the new First Army, regarded as the best KMT army, was forced to surrender after the CCP conducted a brutal 6-month siege of Changchun, resulted in more than 150,000 civilian deaths from starvation. On the 1st of October 1949, Mao Zedong proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China, with its capital at Beijing, which was returned to the former name. Capital at Beijing, which was returned to its former name, Beijing. Shanghai got approximately 2 million nationalist soldiers retreated to mainland China to the island of Taiwan. The communist propaganda and brief operations of 1950 were more successful. The communist conquest of Hainan Island in April 1950 ended the war. Please like and subscribe. This is the second and last video of my Chinese Civil War series.